My name is Bobby Dutta. Eduardo Juarez and I are the co-chairs of SDAC. To kick off our event, we have Mr. Levi Hull, Assistant Deputy Director, Office of Civil Rights, Department of Healthcare Services. Mr. Hull started state services as an EEO investigator and a trainer with Caltrans. In 2016, he moved to CDPH and took a position as a deputy chief of the Office of Compliance Civil Rights Unit, where he was responsible for managing the EEO and Workplace Violence programs. In 2019, he moved to DHCS and currently serves as an Assistant Deputy Director of the Office of Civil Rights and manages the EEO Civil Rights and Reasonable Accommodation program. So, Levi, welcome to SDAC, and sir, the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks, Bobby. I appreciate that opening. Very nice. Like Bobby said, currently I'm the Assistant Deputy Director of the Department of Healthcare Services here at the Office of Civil Rights. I'm basically responsible for the Reasonable Accommodations program, Civil Rights, and EEO programs here at DHCS. Very fortunate to be here today. I've had the pleasure to work with Bobby at the CDPH DAC and as well meet Eduardo when I first got over here at DHCS. So very, very, very happy to be here today. And so really the goal today is I'm kind of doing a little 30-minute, 40-minute disability awareness training, really with the two key components being the telework RA portion, because I know that's kind of a hot topic right now. So I'll kind of go over what we're doing internally. But please note the guidance that did come out from CalHR. It could be different from every agency. It basically said, create your own departmental policies and procedures. So that's kind of what we did. So it could be totally different if your office is shut down, if you're essential, non-essential worker. So just have that peace in mind as well. And then, like I said, with the goal of the training, hopefully add some good value, kind of let you know what we're doing here internally with some of the hot ticket items, the chairs, the sit stands, the equipments, things of that nature, as well as some disability awareness components. But I think we're in a pretty good spot now, disability-wise, as far as our outlook and our future. So kind of going to touch on that a little bit as well. So without further ado, I will get my PowerPoint up here and get that screen shared with you. Okay, and we are up. Okay, I guess Barry, the first thing to say, and I kind of just want to touch base on this, is that this is not a general policy for the whole department. This is very specific to qualified applicants, people with RAs. So just kind of keep that in mind as we're going through. That's kind of why I just want to throw this authority page up real quick. And basically the main authority is going to be the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, where we must provide reasonable accommodations to qualified applicants or employees. So that kind of, leads right into my next slide, which probably is the meat and potatoes of this, and what everyone's interested in is what is DHCS doing for these RAs? We're in a new environment, we're in new times. But with that, the RA laws don't change, right? We got to solve a little bit differently now, but the RA laws don't change. So right off the cuff, all the portable stuff, ergonomic mice, ergonomic keyboards, desktop printers, monitors, phones, anything that's portable and that you can get out of the office without, hurting yourself, we're letting our employees with RAs take those home. Just take them home, right? And then I guess the next important point is chairs, right? So what are we doing with chairs? And what we found to be the most efficient and effective way to handle those is at the supervisory level. And at very first, just to self-accommodate. So if your supervisor lets you take your chair home, take it home. We're not going to step in there. But there are some instances, say, for example, where the supervisor won't let you take home a chair. Maybe because it's really, really heavy and there's some liability with that heavy equipment, right? They don't want you to drop it on your foot. They don't want it coming out of the back of your car on the highway. Maybe, something gets, jiggled around, you get home, it collapses on your dog. We don't want any of that kind of stuff to happen, right? So there's some liability. So if the supervisor does say no on the chair, we just have them come down the RA lane, and then we will handle that like a typical RA. And kind of in that second bullet, any employees that had RAs in the workplace are getting those same RAs at home. We try to solve for those as well as far by going through our RA process. I'll give you a quick example. Actually, I'll wait till I give you that example on the sit stand. So the sit stands are a little bit more nuanced, right? Because they're very heavy. Sometimes they could be 300 plus pounds. We don't want our employees just carrying those out, hurting their back, scraping up the car, things of that nature. So For the large equipment, we're just asking them to come down the RA lane. We'll get that set up at your house. We have a vendor come out to sign off on that to make sure it is good to go at your house, things of that nature. So just to rehash, portable equipment, take it home. Chairs, work with your supervisor. Most likely you're going to be able to take those home. If not, come down the RA lane. We'll get you settled. And then the large equipment, we're just asking to come down the RA lane because of the liability. We don't want anyone getting hurt taking that large equipment home. Yes, Bobby.
Could you slow down, slide a bit? I got a chat message saying they're having just tiny bit.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Sure. So yes, that large equipment, just because of the liability, we're just asking our employees to come down the RA lane to make sure we can get that safe in their home. So that's kind of what we're doing on those three topics. Does anyone have any questions?
We actually have a couple. Levi, we usually serve our questions a little bit later, but we do have a couple of people saying they really want a copy of your Powers slide presentation. So if you don't mind giving that to us, we can forward it to the group.
Absolutely. And I gave Bobby a copy, so Bobby will get that out to you. So those are how we're handling these nuanced situations in this telework environment. But kind of what I went back to saying, our RA laws, our processes, they really haven't changed. We go through the same check boxes that we did prior to the COVID telework policy, right? So when we get an RA, I think the big key component is the interactive process, right? And there's really three things you have to nail down for this to go right. And that is, what are the essential functions? First, the non-essential functions. The non-essential functions, you can change, you could add or delete percentages. You got a lot of flexibility with those non-essentials, right? But those essential functions is what you're really going to build the accommodation around. So you got to really identify what you're solving for. And that first process is, what are the essential functions? And then I think the key point, at least what I've seen in my experience, is you got to identify the barriers, right, by consulting with the employee. But you need to know the exact limitations. Without knowing the limitations, it's very hard to solve for. So my staff, my RA coordinator, that's something that we take a lot of pride in, is really trying to find what the specific limitations are so we can come to an appropriate accommodation and solve for that. And really, it comes down to what accommodations are the most effective, right? I'll give you a quick example. We had an employee, similar sit stand, about a 400-pound sit stand, right? A lot of liability to take that home. It would take a month or two to get our contractors out there to set it up, right? So what we were able to do was, he was working at home on a PC, so we swapped him out for a laptop. And with that laptop, we have docking stations and smaller Berry desks. So he was able to get his sit stand very quickly. Very happy because he's also got all the new chips, the new cameras, and not only that, but it's portable, so he can do a sit stand in his kitchen or on his desk, wherever it's most comfortable for him to do that at. So, we want to make sure we explore the types of accommodations that are most effective for the employee. And so I think these are the three most important bullet points when it really comes down to dialing in the interactive process. And I will slow down a little bit too. I do get talking a little fast. And I guess a key thing that I see that could hang up this interactive process is it really goes both ways, right? So the employee really has to engage as well. If maybe the first option, the accommodation, they don't agree with, or we don't want them to shut down. We want them to keep engaging, keep working with management so we can find those solutions that are mutual beneficial to both parties. So it is a two-way road. So I just kind of want to throw that out there as well. Now, this one kind of goes to our basic, this is more of a refresher here. When do we provide accommodations, right? Job applicants, employees, and I guess the reason I say that is sometimes people will get confused with public accommodations. So, for example, DHCS does a lot of public events, and we need interpreters, assisted devices at those events because members of the public attend those events, right? That's not a reasonable accommodation. Those are only for employees and applicants. This would be a public accommodation, more covered under the ADA. So I just want to kind of clarify that difference there. Employees and applicants. And then also, when an employee has a disability need or accommodation, they need equal access to the same privileges of employment. And just an example to kind of keep that in mind, if you have an external Christmas party or external event, and someone on your team has a disability, maybe don't pick the spot that has the stairs with no ramp to get up, right? Make sure they have equal access, not only in the work environment, but for some of those external events too. So these are the three primary situations where we provide RAs: employees, applicants, and when an employee needs equal access or benefit to an event or privilege of an employment. So we kind of have a checklist, what we do when we go through RAs to make sure, like I said, we're on point, we're solving for what needs to be solved for. And that, again, and I can't hit home on this enough in the RA process, and hopefully if you take something away from today, it is this, and that is, what are the employee's limitations? If the employee can, the better the employee can communicate to you, the more we can solve for the accommodation. And how do those limitations affect the employee's job performance, right? And what specific tasks are problematic as a result of these limitations? So as we're doing RAs at DHCS internally, we'll kind of go through these questions and make sure we're solving appropriately. Again, some of the stuff we go through internally, what accommodations are available to reduce or eliminate the problems, and all the resources being used to determine possible accommodations, right? You can get creative on these. There is no set, there are some common RAs, and we'll go through those, but you can get creative on RAs if you need to. So don't let that limit your imagination. And then I guess this is a really important part. Has the employee been consulted? Because they're going to have an idea of what accommodations work for them, and they're going to have really good ideas. So it's really important that you kind of consult with the employee, because they're going to kind of lead you to, what works for them, and you can kind of go off that. So it's really important. And like I said, it's a two-way road, really engaging with the employee and figuring out, because they may have some great ideas how they've been accommodated in the past that worked, right? And then this is another important factor. Once accommodations are in place, would it be useful to meet with the employee to see how it's going, right? Because sometimes the employee will want something, the supervisor will want something, and you'll meet halfway in the middle, and the employee is like, I don't know if this is going to work. So what we like to do is we like to put a month, case by case, right? So we like to put a month by month, week by week, but we like to check back in to see if that accommodation is working. Because if it's not, we need to revisit it. So I think that's a very, very important piece, is revisiting those accommodations, especially when you get the interactive process where you get the management and employees meeting halfway to make sure those accommodations are working out. And then this is kind of go to our common types of RAs, what we see the most in-house, right? And I think these still hold strong for this telework COVID-19 era we're in, and I'll hit on a couple of these specifically. But modifying work schedules, right? We got to be flexible in the work schedules, granting breaks. Again, you can get creative. Maybe take, 4 or 5 minute breaks instead of, 2 15-minute breaks. I don't think my math worked out on that, but you guys understand what I'm saying. And providing leave, right? There's leave, FMLA, EFMLA, NDI, SDI. That's also a type of accommodation that could be looked at. And then also altering how or when job duties are performed. So, if someone has some type of medical condition that may require them to get up at certain times, you're going to have to alter their job duties just to make sure they're properly accommodated. And then again, we talked about this earlier, but that's removing and or substituting marginal functions, right? Essential functions, they have to stay in place. We've got to solve for those. But the marginal functions, you can change percentages. You can swap out with other duty statements. You can get flexible on those type if that's what is, what's encumbering the employee. Again, I think this is the big one right here, right? Providing assistive technology. With this era we're in, I think it's real key to make sure we're on the cutting edge of technology, whether that's, getting the right reader, getting the person set up, whether, it's an ergonomic or tech evaluation to make sure they're properly set up in their homes so they can use all their equipment properly. So providing assistive technology is pretty big. And then reconfiguring workspaces, right? We touched on it earlier, but we want to make sure, your home space could be totally different than your office space as far as, maybe you want that sit stand that's 4 feet, but your office space is 2 feet. So maybe we have to get you a sit stand that's 2 feet wide, it's case by case, right? But really reconfiguring those workspaces so you're comfortable at home. I've seen employees on their couch, with their knees up on the coffee table. I've seen employees in bed working. Whatever is comfortable and makes you the most productive at home, you can kind of self-regulate that. Again, providing in materials in alternate formats, Braille, large print. Sometimes, if someone's hard of hearing, you may want to record the meeting so they can play it back later and hear those recordings if maybe they missed something in those large meetings. And then another thing we've seen and we like to utilize is the job coach. Maybe help them set up to-do lists or get more organized. Job coaches have been pretty beneficial too, as far as common type of RA. So those are the common types of RAs. But one thing I do want to hit on, and I think kind of gets missed a lot, is invisible disabilities, right? Also referred to as hidden disabilities. It's kind of an umbrella term, and it captures a whole spectrum of challenges that are primary neurological in nature. Invisible disabilities or hidden disabilities are defined as disabilities that are not immediately apparent. And so it's estimated that around 10% of the people in the US have a medical condition that could be considered a type of invisible disability, right? It could be ADHD, it could be an anxiety disorder, it could be allergies, it could be autism, bipolar, depression. There's a large list of them, right? So I think, just kind of know that they're not all physical disabilities. There are invisible disabilities. And with that, it kind of moves into my next slide, which is, my point on this slide is no matter who you are and what walk of life, at some point, you are going to either have a disability or be working with somebody that has a disability. So nearly 1 in 5 people have a disability. It's around 20%. About half of those are severe disabilities, around 10%, right? But when you poll workers just in general, 64% of them think they have a 2% less of chance of being disabled during their working career. So they are very off. So just something to know that at some point, whether you're a supervisor or whether you're very healthy, whether you don't get a disability directly or indirectly, I think people really underestimate their chance. It's a group that anyone can become a member of at any time. And almost any of us will encounter directly or indirectly at some point in our lives. Another interesting thing, if you're interested in it, there's a Council on Disability Awareness, and it actually on their website has a disability risk calculator that you can put a whole bunch of your information in, and it gives you a little calculation. So just something if someone's interested in that. So with that, it kind of kicks into my next little portion here, which is disability awareness, right? What is disability awareness? And it's really the process of educating people about disabilities in order to promote an inclusive work environment. And it can help coworkers overcome any preconceived ideas they may have about persons with disabilities. And I have a video coming up that's going to show you how someone with a severe disability can be very productive and be very enlightening and motivational too within state service. They contribute to the economy. They contribute to technology innovations. So it's something that should be embraced. Engaging, developing, and supporting candidates is critical to optimizing the productivity of every worker. I think not only does it increase job satisfaction and business performance, but it increases morale as well. And every candidate and employee is different from how they consume information and how they like to collaborate and communicate with others. And this is particularly true with people with disabilities. So my next slide here, and this is kind of common, you'll see kind of this on the general EEOC ADA websites, but I like to briefly go through it so people kind of know when you're communicating with disabilities, what are the general norms, right? So speak directly to the person. If you have a sign language interpreter or someone interpreting in some fashion, just speak directly to that person. You don't want to be rude and be looking at the person that's interpreting. You can offer to shake hands with someone that has limited hand use or a disability, or maybe if they're an amputee, feel free to shake their left hand. That's an acceptable greeting. 3 and 4, I think, are pretty big in this telework era because we're doing a lot of this stuff virtually. So if you're in a one-on-one with somebody, always identify yourself and others that may be with you when meeting with someone, especially with a visual disability, right? So they know who's in the room or they know who's in the virtual room. And this one kind of leads to number 4 as well. When conversing in a group, just remember to identify yourself so they know who's speaking, right? And then another key one, if you want to help someone with a disability, that's fine. Just ask first. It's always important to ask and then wait for the instructions because it could be very specific how they want to be handled, whether they're in a wheelchair or some other type of disability, right? So you can always offer assistance. That's not a problem. Just kind of wait and get the response and the instructions. Again, this kind of goes back to treating someone with a disability how you would treat everyone else, right? Address people by their first name and extend that same familiarity to everyone you talk to. Don't treat them differently just because they have a disability, right? Do not lean against or place your hand on someone's wheelchair. People with disabilities treat their chair as extensions of their bodies. I've actually have an interesting story about this. When I was in elementary school, we were all friends with someone in a wheelchair, and he would let the kids push him around at recess. And I always thought, man, that could go pretty bad, right? And one day it did. He took a fall. He got scraped up a little bit. But I mean, if I was him, and I can only imagine because I can't really put myself in his position, but I would never want anyone touching my chair ever again from that point on. So just note that people in chairs, that's part of their body. So kind of treat it as such, right? Never shout at a person. Just speak to them in a normal tone. They may not have a hearing impairment, so speaking to them to a normal tone until you find out otherwise is fine. Place yourself at eye level when speaking with someone in a wheelchair or other assistive walking, standing devices. Try to put yourself at their level. And then again, kind of goes back to the wheelchair as part of their body. Never patronize someone in wheelchairs by patting them on the head or shoulders. And this kind of goes into my last portion of the training here. And that is, while we may not always think we're going in the right direction as far as diversity and inclusion goes, I think we are headed in the right direction. And this little anecdotal PowerPoint page kind of shows that. What this is Haley Dawson. She wanted to throw the first pitch out at all the MLB games, and she has a disability where she has a bionic hand. She doesn't have a hand, but they created a nice little 3D printed hand for her. And so she kind of just threw that out there on social media. And what happened is the Nats mascot picked up on it, and it actually invited her out to throw the first pitch, flew her out, put her up in her hotel, her and her family, and threw the first pitch. Then after that happened, her dream was to throw a first pitch out at every game. So pretty much all the organizations started contacting her and flying her out to throw the first pitch. So I thought it was a super cool story. And it kind of shows that we are kind of trending in the right direction. This is a weird little screenshot here. What this screenshot is, it's a settings from Call of Duty video game. And what it shows is the accessibility settings are getting much better. So when I was young, I always kind of knew I was colorblind. Oranges or yellows kind of look orange to me. It wasn't that much off. But when I actually played one of these video games, I actually started messing around with the accessibility settings just to take a look. And I did kind of find the colorblind settings much better for me as far as, things popping out on the screen and me being able to see the screen. So this kind of just goes hand in hand. I think we are heading in the right direction. And maybe small baby steps, but I do think we are heading in the right direction. I think we have a bright future. And then I'm going to pivot on you here. And just a few things I want to talk about just before I got off is just some general things. This doesn't have to do with RAs, but I will kind of tie in RAs here of what we're doing just to keep our employees safe in the workspace. And I think a lot of departments are doing this. But what we're doing internally is we're providing face coverings, sanitizers, gloves to all our programs. So those are available to all our employees when they come in or when they're here. And then we want to ensure physical distancing in the workspace. So we're doing our best to do that. And when it comes to RAs, there's some employees that need to still come to the office, like the mailroom, right? So if, for example, if someone in the mailroom had an RA, we would try to solve for that, maybe coming in at a time when no one's here, or making sure when they did come in, people were at least, 3 cubicles away from them, plenty room away from them so they can do their work without having to worry about anything. So we want to keep our proper spacing. And then also we give these resources to our employees on our intranet page as well. And this is kind of what I'm talking about. If not all employees are able to telework fully from home. So if they have to come in, and they do have an underlying condition, we want to work with them in our RA line to make sure they're safe when they come into work. We're going to self-screen to make sure when they come in, there's no temperature or anything like that. And we want you guys to self-regulate as well, right? You don't want to come in sick. And then again, we're masking in all our common areas as well. So if any of you want any of the resources that I've had here today, I get a lot of them from the Job Accommodation Network, as well as the ODEP, the Office of Disability Employment Policy, that puts on the NDEAM. They're both great resources if you're looking for some resources for accommodations. And with that concludes my presentation, and I will open it up for questions.
Levi, we have a lot of people that you sparked some great discussion in our comments.
Sure.
The first thing I want to let you know is people definitively would like a copy of your presentation and would like the link to the video that you showed. If you could provide those to Bobby, then we can forward that. For any of you in the comments that are asking for that information, if you're not currently on our SDAC distribution list, please get your email information to Bobby and Eduardo. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the first question on my list, and then I'm going to ask if anybody wants to speak up about their question so we can have a dialogue. So I'm going to the very first one. Sorry, guys, give me a second. So J.L. Gutierrez asks, can you share what vendors that set up at home for RA equipment?
That one I will have to get back to Bobby on, because my RA coordinator kind of handles all the vendors. So he'll definitely know. I just don't know offhand. And I think we have a few different ones, but if you just want to give me your contact information, I can reach back out to you and let you know.
And do we have anybody that typed a question in that would like to unmute and ask their question right now? We'll do one or two of those before we get back to the text questions.
Yes, I do have a question. Thank you so much for that very powerful, moving presentation. You talked about providing recording for employees with a disability, allowing them to record meetings so they can listen in, especially people who are hard of hearing, stuff like that, which really makes sense to me. But how do you reconcile that with privacy concerns? Because in my office, due to privacy concerns, we're not allowed to record any meeting. So how can you make a case for somebody with a disability? How does that work?
Sure. Great question. And you're right. You can't record anybody without their consent. So usually in the situation that I described, it'll be between the employee and manager. They will both consent, like, yeah, you can record this conversation because I know you have a disability. You want to go back, make sure you don't miss anything. But it definitely has to be stated before you can't just record somebody. So you're definitely right. And that would be worked out between the employee and the supervisor. And possibly if it's in a big meeting, we've done this too. So if it's a big meeting, the supervisor will say, hey, we're recording this meeting, just FYI, and kind of like how Bobby did in the beginning. That way we can get a transcript to someone on the back end as well. So it's really case by case, but you're right. You definitely got to let someone know. And there could be certain privacy based on what office you work in where there is no recordings. So that would have to be maybe solved for differently. So yeah, great question. And just real quick, on the DOR's website, someone just mentioned this to me. There is a list of vendors. I don't know which ones we use, but just if you're looking for some vendors, there are a list of certified vendors on the DOR's website that they use too.
Levi, I'm going to throw in another one from the comments. Cynthia asks, I have a question about the sit-stand desk. Do we have a vendor take the office staff home, or do we provide them an additional sit-stand desk in their home? We are in the office 1 day a week, so the person she's asking about needs it 2 places.
Yeah, got you. And really it's a case-by-case basis, right? And every department's doing it differently. So we may be doing it differently than someone else is doing it. So yeah, that's the departmental guidance from CalHR. It's like kind of solve for your why, right? But I think the question is, how would we accommodate the sit-stand at home? And that we would try to do that the best we could. I would have to know the specific details of her RA. But we definitely, if you have an RA at the workspace, we try to get that same RA at home for you, but really is a case-by-case basis.
Do we have anybody else that'd like to unmute and ask a question real quick?
Could I ask a question also? I'm not on the email. How do I get Bobby's email? Could I get that?
Cynthia, why don't you put that in the chat, and then I will make sure he gets that information.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, and then I'm sorry. Do we have somebody who wants to ask?
Yes, I do. This is Shri. I have a question. I have a situation where a person needs an RA. He has a RA at office, but now that we are telecommuting, he's expecting the same thing at his home. But the problem is the RAs, for instance, it requires an ergonomic evaluation of the person and all those kind of items. But how do you, without compromising someone else's health, tell the person go and do an ergonomic evaluation on someone's house?
Sure. And really what we've been doing is we've been doing the ergos virtually. We haven't actually been going into people's houses. There's certain technology they use so they can take measurements virtually too. So and I understand probably why they're doing the ergonomic evaluation, because sometimes the office setup is totally different than the home setup. So you want to make sure you accommodate them, so they're comfortable working at home. But yeah, we've been doing those ergonomic evaluations virtually through our health and safety, and they've been able to get those done pretty quickly is when we need them.
Oh,
but again, each agency is different, so it could be different particulars in your case.
thank you so much.
No problem. Any
I
other
had
questions?
one quick question.
Sure.
Yes. You had mentioned that you received your resources from 2 different places for your presentation. It was the ODEP, and which was the other one? I'm sorry.
The Job Accommodation Network, JAN is kind of its short, and JAN's a really good resource. You can pull a lot of good material off there.
Oh, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, I have a question in the text from Kay Kaplan. I probably got that wrong. It's probably Kay Kaplan. But where can I get more info on Job Coach?
The Job Coach, you can reach out to me via email, and I can kind of give you some detail what we do internally. But really, it's going to come down to your. I don't know if you're the RA coordinator for your group, but I can give you some details if you want to reach out to me via email of what they provide, what they do, and when we use them. That's definitely not a problem. But usually the main thing for the Job Coach is more of a strategy to get organized. They may help you go through a daily planner. They may put some certain check marks for the day that, you check those off. So they've been pretty valuable when we use them, so that they have an effective resource for us.
So Dave Mayer also had a similar question. Dave, did he answer enough of that question for you?
Well, I guess the question is, who are the job coaches? Are they members of the Office of Civil Rights over at Health? I used to work for Healthcare Services, but just kind of trying to get an idea, because I had some difficulty with your office when I was there. But do you have internal people who are job coaches, or are they vendors? Are they?
Great question. Yeah, they're vendors. We work with vendors. I think we have a couple different vendors that do the job coaching. So we work with those, but it is an external vendor, not anyone internal.
Levi, I'm going
Yes.
to interrupt this for a second. We have our next guest present here, Director Will Lightbourne. And any questions that you have presented to Levi, I'm going to send it off to him. And if you would be so kind enough, sir, to respond to that so I can distribute that to our viewers,
Absolutely.
audience. And I really appreciate your presence. This was a terrific presentation. Please come back again because we're not done yet. And I'm sorry to interrupt. And again, thanks for joining us.
All right, thanks, Bobby. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.